Hello, it's Ella Harp, and today I wanted to walk you guys through my basic t-shirt pattern, which I have finally made an actual downloadable printable pattern for you guys out of, which is this guy right here. I'm going to be making it out of this linen tencel, which is the same material as what I'm currently wearing. I find that this pattern works best in lighter weight, sort of almost sheer fabrics. If you have any lightweight fabric that you haven't had a use for, this is a great project. It's super quick, it's super easy. I've made countless versions of these over the years. And finally, this year for my birthday, I usually make very involved patterns around this time of year, but this year I'm exhausted. So I finally got a pattern for this one made up, and I need basics because I've been ignoring them in favor of more dramatic clothing options. So we're gonna make one today out of this lovely fabric right here. Let's get started. I've intentionally left the neckline rather high on this pattern to accommodate the widest range of neckline sizes. This will be cut down at a later step. It's best to sew the whole shirt together first and check the fit before you cut anything. I've laid my pattern piece down on the fabric and it is doubled so that I can make two of the same piece. Once the pattern pieces are cut, it's a good idea to fold them in half and make sure that everything lines up before you start sewing. We'll sew the shoulders together first, so I'm going to start at the sleeve end of one side, work my way up to the neckline, and then repeat the same thing on the other side using a zigzag stitch. Next is side seams from the edge of the sleeve down to the bottom. So on my test fit here, I'm probably going to be aiming for right about that spot. So I'm going to take my little tiny scissors, I'm going to make a little notch, and then I'm going to take it off and cut it up to that point. I'm only going to cut the front section here. I find that it's very easy to cut off more than you want to have cut off on the neckline. So it's always easier to start with more fabric and then take more away if you have to. I'm going to make a little notch here, and then I'm going to take it off and line it up to that point. I have folded the shirt in half, lining it up at the shoulder seams and the side seams at the bottom as well, with the notch right here in the center, and then I'm just going to cut up. Sometimes having a little bit of a scoop at the top is helpful and kind of rounding it out down there, so that's kind of the shape that I'm planning to go for here. This is where it's sitting after that cut. I'm definitely happy with where the shoulders are. I'm not going to take those any further down, but I am going to cut it just a ½ an inch down here in the center. Keep in mind that when you're cutting these, once you sew them, things definitely do stretch out here a bit. So err on the side of caution is my best advice. I have not erred on the side of caution many, many times. And they are not my favorite shirts because they fall off. So I'm gonna make it slightly lower, but definitely not any wider than this. Folded the shirt in half and lined everything up again. And I'm just gonna cut it from kind of this line down. I'm happy with where this is sitting, and once it's hemmed and stretched out a little bit, it'll probably get a little wider and a little lower, so I'm going to hem. I do this in one of two different ways. One is just by taking this fabric, folding it over and sewing it down with a straight stitch. The other is by doing effectively the same sort of thing, but instead of folding it over inside, you fold this section back up again. For a closer comparison of what each one of those looks like, in this one I have this fabric folded over twice and pinned, and on this one I have it folded over and then folded back on itself and pinned. With either one, you'd be sewing as close to the edge here as possible. I'm going to be leaving the sleeves and the bottom raw this time, but you can use the same finishing technique on either or both of those and it will also work. I'm going to go with the folded over. That's what I'm preferring at the moment these days, but of course either one works. I've pinned up the front neckline. I started at the center, then did each one of the shoulders and then filled in the spaces between. Everywhere that you're pinning, you want to keep it a really consistent width. So I'm trying to go with right about 1/4 inch here, which I'm not doing the greatest job of showing with one hand. For the back here, you'll often find that you have a little bit of extra fabric, which I also find myself with here. I tend not to cut this extra fabric off. I tend to use it sort of almost as like a binding to make this section a little thicker, which will help it stretch a little bit less. You could also take a piece of ribbon or something and sew it in between there so that this back will hold a little straighter, but I don't mind if this has a little bit of stretch to it, so I'm going to fold this over and potentially make it a little bit lower here in the back. Here is the fully pinned neckline in the front and in the back. On the rest of the shirt, I use a zigzag, but for the neckline, I will be using a straight stitch because the rigidity of that will actually be beneficial here. So I just want to make sure when I'm sewing this that I am not pulling anything. We want it to be as straight and even feeding into the machine as possible. And if this is stretched out as you're sewing it, it can make this wavy gravy, which we do not want. I like to sew this starting at the top right-hand side. So I'm going to place it under my presser foot, staying as close to the edge as I possibly can, making sure I've moved to straight stitch. And again, being very careful to not pull the fabric in any particular way as I'm sewing. Let the machine do the work. As I'm gonna go, I'm just gonna be making sure that everything is lining up as evenly as possible. So I'm gonna pull that pin and just line this up with my next pin. Man, I hope I don't run out of bobbin thread right now. That would suck. For this section, sort of the point of the neckline, I will take the pin out and then just try to make this lower. This section's always going to want to be a little bit higher, which honestly doesn't really look bad at all. But I'm going to try to make this the same width as much as I can. And this is going to be a little tricky here because you're going around a curve. So just do the best that you can. It tends to smooth out afterwards with wear. All right, coming up on the shoulder on the left side, I'm gonna pull this out a little bit. It can tend to want to get skinny around these areas, which again, really doesn't look that bad, but I'm gonna try to make it as even as I can. And now coming into the back, it's extra important not to pull at all. And it's really tricky on the back because it's pretty much just a straight right on the stretch direction of this fabric. As you're going over this little lump here, I try to use something to hold it down so that I'm not flipping that up if I can help it. And then I'm just gonna stay right along the edge here. Not pulling at all, keeping things as even of a width as possible. Home stretch, almost there. All right, last little bit here. And again, I'm just gonna try and hold this little guy down and do a few back stitches. All right, let's try it out. Here's how the neckline turned out, which is pretty even and perfectly enough for me. And here's the back. You can see there's a little bit on each side of that seam there, but it's not too terribly obtrusive. That's all there is to it. I like to give this a little twist and then a tuck. And I might try and take some nice footage or video or something, but otherwise, that's it. You can obviously hem these bottoms if you want, but I'm just gonna call it a day and go do something else. You can download this pattern for free or donation on my website, which I will link down to below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.